Welcome to the Aluminum Linings podcast, the podcast where we talk about anything except for our day jobs. Kayla is back with us today, and we're talking about one of her other hobbies. We're going to talk about brewing beer today.
Woo.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I guess my first question would be, does the fascination with brewing beer come from trying beer that you're like, wow, that is so good, I'd like to be able to make that? Or trying beer and thinking, this needs a little something?
I think it's a combination of just, loving beer and loving getting to try all sorts of different kinds. I started homebrewing years ago because my roommate brought home a kit. I was just obsessed right away.
So you started with home brewing, but now you work part-time for a local brewery, right?
I do, yeah. So I work part-time at Theoretically Brewing in Lethbridge, Alberta.
I don't know whether this is possible because I honestly know absolutely nothing about brewing beer, to be perfectly honest with you. I did no research. I wanted to go into this extra blind, mostly so that people listening will feel a little bit good about themselves because they'll all know more than me about this. But, is there like generic steps to brewing beer that are always the same?
Yeah, kind of. I can take you through it.
Sure.
Basically, you always start with your malt, which is just roasted barley. And there's different kinds of malts, like they roast them to different darknesses, which is going to give you different flavors. So if you're having like a lager or a blonde, the malt's not been roasted very much. Or if you're having a stout, the malt that you put in there has been roasted a lot. The same like with coffee, if you've got like a light roast coffee or a dark roast coffee. And so you take your malt and you basically soak it in hot water for an hour, which is a little bit like steeping tea. So you soak your malt in your hot water for an hour, and that changes all of the starches in your malt. It breaks them down into simpler sugars, which later the yeast can digest and turn into alcohol. So no matter what kind of beer you're brewing, that's where you start. And then you boil it for an hour, and that's just to kill off anything in there that you don't want in your beer. So to pasteurize it. And then after that, you cool it down, and you add the yeast, and then you leave it, and the yeast does its thing.
Do you recall your first batch of home brewed beer?
I do. What did we make? Oh, it was a red ale. So sort of like if you've had like a Rickard's Red or like any kind of Irish red beer. And it was just one of those ones. So you go to the like homebrew store and you buy this box, and it's got like this big bag of liquid in it.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's like everywhere. Basically what they do is they stop the process right after, I was talking about how you boil and pasteurize it, right? So they stop the process there, and they put it into, I guess they cool it down, and they put it in a sanitary bag and airlock it, and then they sell that.
Okay.
So then all you have to do is you put it into your carboy or your primary, like basically a big container. You add that, and you throw in your yeast, and then you just wait. So as far as homebrewing at home, when you're first getting started, it's super simple. And actually our first batch turned out, which was amazing because we had no idea what we were doing. But they're pretty simple as long as you're really careful with sanitizing everything. And it turned out good. We actually did the second batch turned out terrible. We decided we wanted to make a coconut porter, which should have been easy enough. We bought a porter kit, so just the same as the red, and then all we were going to do is add shaved coconut to it. It should have been fine, but somebody dumbly bought sweetened coconut, which would be me. And we added it to the beer, and we let it ferment, and it was weird. And it was like, I don't even know, like 11% or something, because the yeast ate the sugar and the coconut as well.
Oh my goodness.
Really sweet, weird coconut malt liquor. It was the worst.
Oh my goodness, that's so good. So when you switched over or I don't know if you still brew home beer, but when you started working at Theoretically Brewing, what were things that, like, was it something you learned a lot on the job, or did you have a lot of the knowledge before you even started?
I don't really homebrew so much anymore, just because I'm there brewing all the time. I would love to keep homebrewing, but I just haven't found the spare moment. But when I started, I pretty much learned everything on the job. Some people go to brew colleges, like I know there's one in Olds, but I met the brewmaster of Theoretically Brewing while I was doing my chemistry degree, because he's a chemist as well. And I told him I wanted to get into brewing beer, and he was like, come learn with me. don't go to school. So I learned everything
Oh,
on the job.
awesome.
Yeah, which was great. And there's brewing beer is simple stepwise, but there's so many little variables and so many different things you can tweak and change. It's just been such a fun learning experience.
Do you find there's a lot of room for like creativity when you're doing something like that?
So much. That's one of the things I love about it, actually. I don't know if you're as adventurous with beer drinking as I am. If you go to a liquor store right now, there's like so many kinds. There's, there's sours, there's double hopped IPAs, there's raspberry, chocolate, cherry, strawberry, lime, like every different flavor. So I think the craft beer world is kind of wild right now. Like I just drank beers that were a partnership with Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay.
So they put donuts in the mash and it tasted like a donut. So I mean, there's so much room for creativity. Yeah, every little part of the recipe you can play with. So you can play with which malts you use, how dark they are, how much, and then you can play with which hops you use and which yeast you use, which gives it a different flavor. So there's so much. I love the creative side of it.
Do you find your chemistry degree has really come in handy?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, it's so a lot of brewing is, water chemistry and then liquid and gas chemistry as well, plus the biochemistry side of yeasts and yeast strains and things like that. The thing I found that has actually come in the most handy is having worked in a lab during my undergrad really taught me how to be really meticulous about, sanitizing things and weighing things out and following the steps. Like doing an organic synthesis and brewing a batch of beer are shockingly similar. So that's kind of where I've really found that the skills I've learned kind of really shine through.
Okay. I feel like I'm just firing questions at you. I'm very excited by all of this. Do you have a favorite beer that you've brewed so far?
Oh, I think probably my favorite is we made a chai vanilla porter called Space Chime Continuum. A quick background is the brewery that I work at is all science themed. So besides the joy of making a beer, I also get the joy of making terrible science puns.
Excellent. I love it.
The chai vanilla porter was I had one a couple years back, actually from Village Brewing, that I loved, and I hadn't found a chai beer that I liked since. And so I convinced the team, the brewery, to let me brew a chai vanilla porter. And that was one of the earliest ones they sort of let me take the lead on the recipe for, which is a really big honor, especially when I'm, so new to brewing, to get to sort of create my own recipe. And I just love how it turned out. I love chai. It's got lots of chai spice in it. It's nice and dark and cozy for the winter. And it's got that nice like vanilla hint of like sweetness to sort of round the whole thing out. So that one's my favorite I've ever made.
Is there, this might be a little bit of a stupid question. Is it like making soup where you taste test it throughout, or do you just kind of hope the recipe works and then once it's done you're like, well, this is the thing that I have?
Kind of less like soup because I don't know. I do taste it along the way, and there's some ways that you can do that, but there is a little bit of like finger crossing at the same time too. Because a lot of the flavors you can't really taste until it's finished, So I can taste it along the way, but a lot of it doesn't really come out quite right until the yeast is finished doing its job and the hops have sat in there for a while. So I do tend to taste it at the end, and then you can tweak at the end with some extra ingredients. If I taste it at the end and I feel like it doesn't have enough vanilla, I can add more vanilla. But you kind of, there's some parts you can't change.
Yeah, where you just gotta let the yeast do its thing. And
exactly. It's a little more like baking.
Okay, fair enough. At some point, you just have to put the cookies in the oven.
That's the metaphor. That's it. Yeah.
So on top of making terrible science puns, you guys also, and I actually looked up what this was called right before we started, and the name is disappeared from my brain. But you also named the big vat things after scientists, right?
We do. Yeah, the fermenters.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh my gosh, that's one of my other weird little favorite parts of my job. So the fermenter is the place where you, after the beer's been boiled and pasteurized, you cool it down and you move it into your fermenter. And the fermenter is an airtight vessel. So you add your yeast in there and then you close it all up so that there's no air in there, because that helps prevent any sort of weird wild yeast or bacteria from getting in there. And on ours, we've got this little sort of like chalkboard paint sticker. And so on that we write like what the date is, what the name of the beer is, and then we name all of them after a scientist. So I've been just having a great time looking up different scientists. And, you know, a lot of times I try to pick a scientist that maybe nobody's heard of or maybe piques my interest in some way. Like I love featuring, you know, women scientists on there. I love featuring, you know, trans scientists or people who are doing really interesting research, or even people who are alive right now who I follow on Twitter and stuff. So I can be like, hey, I named my tank after you because I like your tweets.
Yeah, I was gonna say I found a few scientists on Twitter from following Theoretically Brewing. I found a few on Twitter where I'm like, wow, this is so cool. I love this.
Yeah, I love scientist Twitter too, because they're always, you know, I feel like I learn a little bit during my social media doom scroll, which is nice.
Yeah, exactly. I guess for me this is very interesting because we talked last time about supporting local business and being integrated with other local businesses and things like that. And so I think even from like a scientific perspective, I like it. It's nice to see a group of scientists, you know, really being like, hey, look at all these other scientists that are like awesome. And you don't really see that competition that can sometimes be in some of the uglier sides of academia sometimes. So yeah, I just think that is super cool, and I love that you guys do that.
No matter what industry you're in, I think things can get, you know, competitive and maybe like a little bit not so wholesome every once in a while. But both, you know, by being able to be scientists and, you know, promote other scientists on our tanks and just being able to like work together with the local community too, I think it fosters a better community kind of between everybody.
How does it work when you work for a brewery in terms of distribution of beer? Like if you're a smaller company?
There's sort of a couple different avenues for selling beer, and some breweries do all of them, some just do part. So the first part is if you're just a working brewery and you don't have a tap room, all you can do is kind of put your beer into cans or bottles and then sell it to liquor stores. Or what's obviously more popular in Alberta now is the craft brewery with the tap room. So you can go into the actual brewery itself and they're making beer in the back and then they're selling that beer out front. And that's kind of the most fun way to do it because, you know, we can offer pints or growler fills and also like a community sort of area and feeling. So where people can come in and they can come drink our beer right on site and meet other people. Obviously, you know, pre-COVID, theoretically uses our tasting room as a small music venue as well, which is so fun.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and it just creates a really neat sort of like community vibe, and I think that's one of the best things about craft breweries is it's different than going to a bar or a pub because there's sort of this really like grounded neighborhood kind of feel to most of them. And they're really like entrenched in their local communities and their neighborhood. And it's a great way to meet people. So you can kind of sell beer out of your tasting room and we do both. So we also can and sell to liquor stores, and we can sell locally here in Lethbridge. And honestly, most of the time me or Kelty just goes and drops it off, just drives it over.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or when it comes to selling across the province, that all goes through one central body, the Government Association, AGLC. So we sell to them, they hold it in their warehouse, and then anyone across the province who's buying liquor for their liquor store or their restaurant or whatever can order from us and anyone else kind of through that central warehouse.
Oh, okay. Could people like request a local beer, or is it kind of you just have to find a store that happens to be stocking them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it depends on if the liquor store that you're talking to does that kind of thing, but a lot of liquor stores, especially ones that are very craft beer focused, love to hear what people want to drink. So, you know, you could go to your local liquor store that stocks craft beer and be like, hey, I'm really looking for like Theoretically's key lime sour. Can you order that in for me? So it's definitely a possibility. You can also find us in quite a lot of places, like in Calgary, Edmonton, even north as well, in Grand Prairie. Yeah, but requesting is amazing because people like liquor stores might not pick us up, just, you know, some little brewery from Lethbridge, unless people are asking or requesting it. So that's very appreciated.
Okay. And then do you guys do certain types of beer that you brew all the time, and then every once in a while you do like a specialty batch, like that vanilla chai?
Yeah, we have 6 cores that we keep all the time, and those kind of encompass sort of every flavor palette. So, you know, we've got like a wheat beer, we've got an Irish red, a stout, an IPA, like your classics kind of across the spectrum. And then
Mhm.
we do a whole bunch of seasonals, and those kind of come up just depending on what season it is and what I feel like making. So, we
Yeah.
always do like a Christmas one, which is the chai one. And we do a Women's Day brew every year. Usually we get, not to totally sidetrack, but usually we get a bunch of women to come in and help us brew as like Women's Day project. Obviously not this year, but I just finished putting that one in the tank, so that should be out soon. And then we do like a spring one, a summer one or two, a fall one, that kind of thing.
Man, that's so cool. I feel like I could continue to ask you questions for hours, but instead, where can they find theoretically brewing on the old interwebs?
On the old interwebs, we have a Facebook page. I believe it's just theoretically brewing on Facebook, and the Instagram is theoretically_brewing_co. So that one's a bit long. And our Twitter is actually very active.
Okay.
Our owner, Kelty, loves to talk about politics and world issues and all that kind of stuff on Twitter. So if you like to hear that kind of thing, I think it's at Theory Brew. At Theory Brew. Yeah, that's the one.
Okay,
so
perfect.
that's the Twitter. That's really active with lots of chat and things like that.
I will link all those in the description as always. You can also find all my content on aluminumlinings.com, or if you're not on the social medias, you can go there to sign up for a newsletter so that when new podcasts and blog posts and things come out, you'll get an email. I think that's it. Good luck. Have fun. Don't talk to strangers unless you want to make new friends. Bye!